Today in the studio, I have the most fabulous Deborah Valentine, global mobility expert, a guiding hand in managing relocation and thriving in it, Executive Director of Access, which is a group which supports the successful relocation of internationals to the Netherlands and will actually be celebrating its 35th anniversary this summer. Welcome, Deborah. Can you start with a brief summary of who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
Hello, Julie. Thank you for inviting me. As you said, my name is Deborah Valentine, originally Canadian. That's the passport, but I was born in Germany and spent basically the first 40 years of my life relocating, first with my father's career, then with my own career, and then with my ex-husband's career. I now have the Dutch nationality as well, but I am now pretty much settled and living in the Netherlands, but still spent the large majority of my life moving every 4 years.
And so you have then built your career around helping others. Why?
I built my career by mistake, or maybe by circumstance. Let's put it that way, not mistake. Of course, when I worked for the UN, when I had my own global mobility career, there was never an issue. Then I got married, and then we asked for any country in the world so I could continue with the UN, and we were sent here to the Netherlands. So I was the unemployed accompanying spouse. The first time I went back to school, so that filled up some time. We then moved, and I was fortunate enough at the time to work again with the UN. Another move to a country where I wasn't allowed to work was when I really started just realizing that people came to me with questions and I had the answers. And inadvertently, I started doing that, volunteering or just as being a member of the community. And it sort of stuck. Then when we moved back to the Netherlands, I was the accompanying spouse, this time with 2 children in my back pocket, so to speak. A marriage which at the time was not doing well. Managed to find a job, but realized that deep down I was drawn to the international community.
But isn't that wonderful? I mean, it's how your mission basically found you. So you were going through these circumstances and having to relocate each time and learning, the good sides, the bad sides, how to cope, etc. And then decided that basically that's what you wanted to do, was to help other people in that situation. And I think they're always lovely stories when your mission actually finds you rather than desperately looking for it. Now, Deborah has become a dear friend, and interestingly, we met when we were both working for a company which provided partner support for expatriated employees. Now, as the expert networker, she actually introduced me to mine when I arrived here in the Netherlands in 2012. She introduced me to basically most of the people who are still the backbone of my life here, whether networking organizations, professional organizations, dance parties, I remember very well. That made me feel so good here in The Hague. So, I mean, this is really very important. Now, relocation is something that, well, as Deborah's just said, and we both know well, we are both third culture kids. Deborah's relocated, I think it was 12 times. I have moved 23 and relocated as an adult 6 times. And I've been asked, does it get easier with age? And I think, well, I'm not sure. I mean, you learn to survive. You learn that you will survive it. So you learn that even if at times, you're ripping your hair out because you're not quite sure what you're doing with your life and you have to settle everything in for the family, especially if you're the one following, let's say, if you're the one who's accompanying the person who has got the foreign assignment. But I don't know. What do you think, Deborah? Does it get easier?
I don't think it gets easier in the context of easy versus hard.
Right.
I think it becomes different as you grow older. In my case, for instance, I grew up as a child, so I knew no other way of living.
Yes.
I have 2 brothers who, as soon as they could, they relocated and they settled in Canada and they haven't left. After my studies, I was like, no, this is not my jacket. So every move has been different because I've been different. I'm older, or I've got experience, or I've gotten married, or I've acquired children, or so I don't know if it becomes easier. For me, it was just another dimension.
I think it's also true what you're saying, that it's the circumstances also, where when I look at mine, so indeed as a child, I moved with my parents and I remember resenting it at times, very much so. Actually, at the age of 14, when we moved to the Netherlands, I developed acute asthma, and it was really my way to say, I don't want to go and you're not listening to me. Of course, I loved it. The second I arrived, it was a lot more vibrant than my little village in France, and I could go out and all that. So I loved it, but I remember feeling very resentful that I was being dragged along. And then, of course, lo and behold, I go and marry a Dutch diplomat. And so then I would say it does also depend on your circumstances. I remember arriving in Cameroon. So I'd just given up my career, had a newborn baby. And of course, in Cameroon, you don't go to the park and meet other mothers. I mean, you can't push a pushchair down the street because there are potholes, and it's not really the sort of thing you do. So it's very lonely, extremely lonely. And then I would say with the children, what helped a lot was having the children, because they gave my day some structure. Especially, it was a lot of Africa, so they weren't really mobile. They couldn't do much on their own. So they sort of introduced me to most of my friends and my networks at first. And same as you, so I'm now in the Netherlands and happily divorced, let's say. And I am restless because, like you, I've moved every 7 years. So since a child, always. And I'm now, I think, in my 8th year here in the Netherlands. And I'm not sure, it's not the same anymore. Obviously, my ex-partner isn't here anymore to be the one. So I'm thinking, well, okay, well, what about you taking yourself somewhere else? But, my children are still here, even though they're not living at home. And I'm thinking, well, it must be quite different going, somewhere different, so relocating without that structure. I was thinking about our 50 plus tribe and thinking, well, for those of us who do have children, I think a lot of our settling at the beginning does come through the people that we meet via school or children's sports activities. Would you say there are extra challenges for relocation after 50, assuming then that most of the children have left home, if any?
That's a really good question. And I think my answer would be that if anything, it might become a little bit more difficult. As we get older, so I'm told, I'm several years past 50 now, it becomes a little bit more difficult to find moments to meet people. Right. And so that adds a challenge. Of course, those who have families can have forced environments where they meet the other school teachers or parents or other children. So you can create an environment where you're meeting people. I think if you're an empty nester, if the children are settled and off at university, you probably have to make a little bit more of an effort, right, to find the groups. And again, it depends what country you're in. Relocating to a country like the Netherlands is very different to relocating to a country somewhere in Latin America or in Africa or in Asia. So I think it can be more difficult, but I think for me, looking back on my life, so 50 and looking back, I try not to look forward too much just yet. I'm transitioning. I think I have learned so much that I can help others, whether you've got children, whether you are married or not married, anybody who is starting on this, path of global mobility. And I have some knowledge and experience and network, and people come to me naturally, and I realize that I can share quite a bit.
Right. Now that's interesting, because we've just talked about the differences, different countries. But so what are the commonalities? What are the main points when you relocate?
Well, I do think so. You asked me for 3 tips during our conversation today. Right. And I think the 3 tips, it's regardless of where you go. Right. And my first is be curious, remain curious about people, about food, about cultures, about how things work. Put on your detective glasses when you first arrive somewhere, because in asking questions, you will learn. Yeah. And in learning, you will appreciate. And appreciation is my second tip. Appreciate what you experience. It will be different. It might be vastly different. It might be slightly different, but difference there will be. But I think by appreciating things, we set our mind to be positive. True. About the challenges. Right. If we're always complaining about something, we're not going to have space to appreciate. It could be the flower in your garden. Right. It could be the early morning sunrise. Whatever, how small or large, there is something to appreciate. So curiosity keeps you learning. Appreciation keeps the mind open to learning new things that will benefit you.
Right.
And those two are sort of linked. And my third tip is something that I've come across so many times. It's changing. Global mobility is changing. 30 years ago, which is when Access started, and Access is the organization that I'm the director of at the moment, there were very few working accompanying partners.
Yep.
And the countries people came from were probably about 5 or 7. Fast forward to today, we have a generation of people who've given up careers to accompany somebody. The countries are as numerous as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more diversity. One of the things I say to people is, please remember, when looking for a job, if you have to work, then God bless you, we'll help you. You have to find a job. You need it to pay your bills. But quite often, it's not necessary. And what I really want to tell people is, a paycheck is not who you are. What you do is what gets you out of bed in the morning, allows you to be curious, allows you to appreciate things. For those who have to work, okay, fine, that's a reality.
Yeah.
But for many of us, we can perhaps take advantage of the opportunities of moving to go back to school,
Yeah.
to start knitting,
Yeah.
to volunteer, whatever fulfills you as an individual.
I'm so with you on that one. And I do struggle for, our last year, let's say Senegal is also about 10 years or so, or 15 years ago now. And I remember that new generation coming in of accompanying spouses. The word sounds of all sexes, both men and women, who were highly educated, like most of us were as well. But we had, accepted that was part of the thing, is that we could both have a career, or for most of us at the same time, but that we were at peace with the idea of, as you said, discovering something new, having maybe more time to be around the family, having more time to do hobbies or studies on the side, etc., whatever our reasons were. But this was a different group. This was a group which was already arriving a little bit on a battlefield, what about me, and what about my career, and what about, what can I do here? Or people who did find a job who were, up in arms because it wasn't the same salary by far, etc. And I remember trying and feeling like a granny to say to them exactly what you've just said. It's not your worth is not determined by how much you're earning, it's by what you were learning.
Yeah.
And I will never forget, and I have said it so many times, including to the tax authorities, which I've just taken to court for something at the moment.
I heard.
The tax authority is a different story. It's about the difference between indirect hours working on your business and direct hours earning from your business. And I was saying, well, is it less valuable then? But to come back to that point, in Senegal, for some very strange circumstances, I ended up president of a women's group I was barely even member of. I was quite allergic to that sort of thing and kept very far from it. But anyway, long story short, at the end of the summer, suddenly I was parachuted from barely a member to the president. And I remember the first meeting, there were only about 40 members and I needed to talk. It was the general meeting. And I was so nervous, I literally vomited in the toilet before going in. The second meeting, people had said, oh, that was actually very structured and very good. I was feeling a little bit better. I had just a sleepless night. I didn't vomit. The third, the fourth, the fifth, and now I am entirely at ease speaking in front of 5,000. I really, the numbers don't matter. I have learned a confidence which I would never, ever have imagined possible. And then at the end, the group was 250 strong and lots of, at embassy level and all of that sort of thing. And I learned that, and it is probably the most valuable thing I have ever learned, let alone my BA and all my coaching diplomas and all of that. That has given me a confidence and made me who I am. And I was not paid. I worked 14 hours a day for nothing. So never underestimate the value you gain from, as you said, unpaid jobs.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, no, and it's a perfect, a beautiful example for you. I do have to add a little footnote to that though. Not everybody has the confidence in themselves, in their character. Maybe they're introverts. Yeah. Maybe they are quieter in general. And I know that the struggle for introverts is sometimes greater because we are saying that in order to summarize, in order to succeed, we need to get out and be extrovert and grow your network and meet people. For somebody for whom that is diametrically opposed to their character, that is an impossible task. Yeah. However, we have this little insight that we've gained during COVID, that we can do things online. And that gives some people the extra comfort they need
True.
to start reaching out. And so we're seeing opportunities with so Access works with a lot of volunteers, in fact, 90% volunteers. Most of our volunteers are partners of people who've relocated here.
Right.
So they are young. Sadly, while we were all getting vaccinated and discussing birth years, I realized how young.
Yes.
But anyway,
I know that.
that was a little bit of a shock. And they have all given up careers. They've had the in-depth discussion at home, which I never had, or my mother never had before. It was just a decision. We're moving, period. This generation is having the discussions before they move. So there is an awareness that perhaps we didn't have 30 years ago.
True.
And because of that discussion, disappointment sets in quite quickly because there is an expectation. I'm moving to the Netherlands. There is a multilingual market of employers. There are all these benefits because that was part of the negotiation that's taking place either with a company or the government. They set up this system. So people arrive with a higher expectation and then they, hit the truth. There might be less jobs. It might take longer. You might need to learn Dutch. You have to network.
Yep.
So that's a very challenging period. But going back to the introverts, my tip for them would be to acknowledge who they are. So they can't force themselves, but try and find one person, one person who hears and sees you and can accompany you to a network event or will go for a walk with you where you can express your curiosity about the country you live in and therefore learn some things and hopefully enhance and engage your own confidence about dealing with this big relocation world.
That is so true. And if you find somebody who's also just arrived, I mean, that usually is your savior. At first, you go to the shops together, you go to the town hall together, you do all of that.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, I was just thinking, I was actually speaking to a student the other day who, because of COVID, has obviously not been meeting other people. And there was suddenly, there was a networking event. And she was really excited about this. We got it all ready. And then the moment of the event, I don't know if I want to go. I don't know anybody. And I said, well, yeah, that's why you go. It's so that you do meet people. Yeah, but they already all know each other. And I said, well, maybe they don't, And I was sort of saying, well, you know what? Go and then look around you. And I am sure I can guarantee you, you will see at least one person who's also looking around. And I remember very much arriving in Berlin, and the Parent Teacher Association had got a lovely networking event for all of us, new mothers or fathers, etc. So I decided to go. It was when the children were still a bit younger. And same sort of thing. So I arrived there and they all knew each other. So they were all, how was your summer? And how was this? And, really the feeling of feeling alone in a crowd. And then I was telling the student, well, I did exactly that. So I started looking around. Who can I see who looks also uncomfortable? So this person who became a great friend, Kate, was standing around the buffet and she was basically eating as many croissants as she could get in her mouth, just something to do because she was feeling uncomfortable. And same thing. So I walked up and I said, oh, you look as if you're also probably new. And of course, she just happened to have a croissant in her mouth at that moment. So she spluttered all over the place and we became best friends for life. So it is all of that. It's also that not thinking that everybody else does know someone. And I mean, I am an extroverted person, but I know what you mean. I mean, I remember arriving each time somewhere new, even silly things like, okay, first day at the gym. They all seem to know where to put their mat, where to get this. And the advantage of age, then I would say, is you become a little bit less self-conscious about, oh, what are they going to think? They're going to think I'm stupid. They're going to think blah, blah, blah. But you feel a bit like, okay, right, well, I better ask someone. But I mean, that's as an extrovert. And if I may, one last anecdote, I'll never forget that. Same thing, it was Berlin. I was queuing up to get bread at the baker's. And there was an Asian lady, quite a few people in front of me. There was a huge queue. I have no idea why it was so long. But anyway, there was a huge queue in the baker's. And this lady, then it's her turn. And she just freezes and leaves the shop. And so everybody was a bit like, oh, what was all of that about? And afterwards, when I got my bread, I saw her on the square and she was sitting on a bench and she was crying. And I went up to her and she spoke English, thankfully. And she was very quiet, very young. And she was sort of saying, it was going so fast and I didn't even know which bread to ask for. There was this lovely lady who wanted to feed her family, and she didn't even know which bread to ask for. And I mean, it's tiny things, sometimes the smallest things like that, which set you back. And I'm thinking, if we hadn't had the chance to have a little bit of a talk, and of course I was older, so I could say, I do know how you feel, and, just look one up, write it down, or just try different ones, just point different ones, and each time try a different one until you find one you like. And imagine her going home, so her children are at school, her partner's off at his job, and just sitting there in this very foreign environment, feeling so lonely.
Yeah, and being reminded of how lonely you are because you walked out of a bakery without even getting anything. No, I mean, it does. So for the extrovert, it's a little bit easier. For the introvert, it requires people to be a little bit more daring, but look out for others and ask. Because when you walk into that networking event and everybody's chit-chatting, not only is there going to be one or two people who look like you so you can gravitate towards them, but the moment you tell somebody you've just arrived, the conversation will change.
Yes.
Because they will be reminded, oh, wait, I remember what that was. Let me introduce you to whatever. But when we stand quietly in the background, nobody knows.
Yeah.
And when nobody knows, they can't help. But certainly in those international environments, find somebody who looks a little bit in the same spot, but be curious. Be daring a little bit. Trust yourself. There will be somebody there who will help you. And that's, of course, talking about the international environments. We also encourage people to get involved locally, to get to know their neighbors. Sometimes it's difficult because of language. Sometimes there's some cultural norms you need to understand. The Dutch are very good at separating work and life, office and home. So when you're invited to a Friday afternoon drinks, go. Because that's one of those sacred moments where they will combine work and private. You won't get a lot of details about their private life. Certain topics you don't discuss. Don't mention salary, by the way. That's a big no-no culturally in this country. But those are the moments to connect, because whereas in other cultures, there might be more of a mesh between the two times and the two kinds of lives you got at home or at work. Here, there's a division, and that makes it even harder to connect.
And each country has its different things, right? I mean, since the audience here is very broad, I mean, in Holland it is that thing. In Germany it's something else.
Exactly.
And most things you can find out a little bit online first, or if your employer, has a file on the country itself, to have a little bit. But basically, what you're saying, and I'm hearing you say it the whole time, is you have to get out there, right? I mean, you can sit at home; it's not going to come to you. It is an effort. There is action in relocating, as in you do need to do it, which doesn't mean you have to throw yourself into every event, which doesn't mean you have to pretend to be somebody that you're not, but there is some action. So it's finding where you want to start, whether it's, so then I suppose if you do have children, you already have an opening there. There will be parent teacher meetings, and of course everything's slightly different now with COVID. Obviously that's an extra dimension to the challenges maybe of relocation. I mean, what other avenues would you say there are for people, say, who don't have children, and say who are 50 plus arriving in whatever country it is they are?
So that is a bit more of a challenge. And what I do say, volunteering is a great way to meet people. And in many countries, not all, but in many, there will be opportunities for you to volunteer your time for which you don't require the local language. Volunteering, as we all know, across the world covers many fields. If you're an active knitter,
right?
There's a knitting club. If you're a runner, there'll be a walking club. So at least in the Netherlands, Access can help you to find those groups. But it's finding a group that shares an interest is a starting point. If that's difficult, I actually do tell some people, join every group you can. At least for the first 4 to 5 months. You're going to meet some people you have no connection with and never want to see again. But at least, okay, you don't want to see them again. So the group that you do want to see, you will also meet. You will also learn and get information. So networking groups, definitely.
And even, I suppose, even getting out there, and I'm busy thinking, okay, but so what about those where, you know, because of COVID, then there is no, you know, group gathering or whatsoever. I mean, even just, you know, walking in your neighborhood by yourself, or, you know, if you have a dog, dogs are also great ways
Yes.
to network. You know, meet
No, but
somebody
I
else
mean, in
with a
the
dog.
online world, Julie, I think, you know, and because, yeah, I'm over 50. So I think for us, the online world is just a little bit more
Yeah.
scary.
It's not something we're used to, right? We weren't
No.
brought up with an online
Whereas
world.
a lot of what I'm noticing is that a lot of the people who are, at least the volunteers at Access, the internationals that I've met, they're a lot more comfortable in this digital environment. And they use it very differently. And they've got apps on their phone. I don't even know how they work or how to access them. So there are digital tools for an audience that is a little bit more comfortable with digital tools to meet and engage with other people. However, one of the advices that I give, one of the things that we're seeing is that people say, oh, I went to this webinar, I went to this networking event, but they didn't say anything. They didn't ask a question. They didn't turn their camera on. They just observed. And
very good point. So it's the same thing as what you were saying before. It's the equivalent of standing at the back of the room and not saying anything.
And what might make it easier in the digital world is you don't expose yourself, and I'm not sure that's the right word, but you don't have to expose yourself as much as walking into a room with 60 people and finding one person, because you can observe a lot online. And sometimes you can just ask a question and somebody goes, oh, yeah, I also wondered about that. So you've already made kind of a connection. So I think there are digital tools that I, as a 50 pluser, am learning from. I'm not going to go there because I'm not interested. I don't need
you don't need it, right? Yeah.
But I think we, as the 50 pluses, need to remain curious, because this world is catching up to us. If you have children who are willing, like mine are, thankfully, sometimes, to show you how it works,
right,
you can then make the decision, I'm not going to use it. But remain curious, know how it works, know how people are meeting online, and say, okay, either I have to cross this bridge as well, or I'm going to find other ways of doing it. But again, it's, you know, go to all the networking events, be curious, throw yourself in, and after 3 or 4 months, go, okay, you know what? I'm not going to do
then you
all
make
of
your
these.
own choice, right? I mean, same thing in the beginning. I mean, I was everywhere. I used to go out almost every day until I found the groups which did work for me. I very much like this. And the curiosity, definitely, because curiosity is how we learn and how we grow. But what you said about appreciation, it's, you know, let's go from the principle that you weren't dragged here by your hair, you know, like in a Flintstone cartoon. So it is good to hope that there has been the discussion. I liked your point before there was maybe not that much discussion. It was my career says we're moving to New York, so we're moving to New York, whether you think about it or not. But let's say that nowadays it is often a discussion. And I mean, companies, as we both know from the company we worked for, are very keen on having the partners on board, because otherwise you send out your employee to huge expense with a spouse and children, and then, you know, after 6 months it's a disaster. The spouse can't stand it, which makes
70% of relocations that fail because of partner family dissatisfaction.
I mean, I can imagine that, you know, if they're miserable at home, the employee is going to feel. I mean, I even know from my ex, when I used to sometimes moan about where's my career gone and all of that, what's going to happen the day if we go back. And then that wasn't even when I was thinking what happens if we divorce and I end up with nothing. You know, it's I remember him feeling sometimes very responsible for my well-being, for the children's well-being. And I say, well, no, you know, it takes two to tango. I chose this. I said, yes, I'd love to go, because also I was curious. And that appreciation is so true, because I don't know your experience, Deborah, but I was in very many countries, and I won't actually mention the nationality, but there was particularly one nationality where it was in particular women who were then the accompanying one were extremely bitter. Everything was always better in their country. It was, you know, everything was a problem there. Each day of their life was sad and bitter. And I'm thinking, well, this is your life, you know, whether you chose it or not, you know, you have a choice. Either you go back home, or you stay and you embrace it. And whether it's a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year post, decide what can I learn from this. So again, it's all about that mindset. Same thing as obstacles in life. We often don't choose them. And sometimes stuff happens that we really wished hadn't happened. But the stuff that we can't change ourselves, then we embrace it. And you will always learn something which makes you stronger that you probably hadn't even imagined.
No, and what's important is to appreciate. You don't have to appreciate everything.
No.
What I'm hoping to share, what I've learned, is that even if you can't appreciate anything, you don't like the language, you don't like the climate, whatever, find something that you can appreciate. A flower in your garden.
Yeah.
A meal that you would have never made.
True.
Because starting from that,
or just the fact that you're learning something new, your horizon is broader. You will never go back to being that person you were before. You will know.
But that's too big.
Oh, is it? Okay.
That's too big at the beginning. If somebody is complaining the whole time, it's too big to think there. They need something. Okay. When I open my door, I love that plant.
Right. Okay. So you hold on to something small.
Small, because from there you can grow things and get to what you're just talking about, what you just mentioned, appreciating what else is happening to you in that period, the language you've learned, the new wardrobe you may have acquired because of the climate.
Or just the fact that you know that things are different, that in some countries they eat dinner at 5 o'clock, or that in some countries they like little pieces.
Oh yeah, I never did that. I never did
exactly. No, but as you say, especially when you move around, you make your own multi-culti thing. I mean, I realize I've picked up on traditions or dishes or expressions from all the countries that I went to. Of course, there were things that I didn't like. You know, I didn't particularly like having to fight for electricity and water and stuff and all of that in Africa. But still, I suppose it has, on the good side, made me appreciative of just being able to open a tap and assume that there's going to be electricity every day. Deborah, I just see the time and we are way over.
Way over. But you and I have this problem. We went out for a drink the other day, which took a little bit longer than it should have. But
exactly. And this was the drink where I was only supposed to drink cola light, right? And we had quite a few
I wasn't going to mention that, but okay.
No, this is fantastic.
But thank you for having me. And you know, and the biggest message for me as a fabulous 50, I love my age. I have no regrets, but I realize that I've learned so much that I hope I can encourage and teach to others. And that's, for me, is part of this new beautiful age, empty nest, getting more time. So how can I use that effectively? Through my work and through just letting people cross the bridge one step at a time.
Beautiful, Deborah. Thank you very much. I had no doubt that you would be creating a lot of value for our listeners. So for those relocating, for those, I mean, to be honest, some of those tips, you know, are valid for anybody, you know, for in life, any change that we go through, and whether it's a new job where we also have to get out there and meet new people and meet new ways. So, I mean, the curiosity, the appreciation, and also that fact, indeed, for the people who are with somebody else who's employed, is the fact that it is not the paycheck. It's how can you grow, how can you learn. And for our group as well, I think a lot of it is, to come back to your final words, was how can we contribute. So thank you very much. For those of you out there, as always, what have you learned? What will you change? And when will you start?